Chapter 17. The map shard rode one hand and the gutter pipe the other. The jungle had no road in it, only tendencies, depressions between root bowls, a line of pale moss where water once ran. The way light arranged itself when it found a long corridor through the leaves. I walked where the world suggested. The pack sawed at my shoulders in a good way. Weight that belonged to me. The strap spit and the bite was honest. The decision I had drunk sat under my skin like a coal. When I asked it for heat, it gave me heat. Root boon, Survivor's Dilemma, KEEP, active, 927, FX, resolve +2, grit +2, DR +20%, regen +25%, fear/stagger immunity. Passive, after wind's default severity, +15% enemy frailty. The chorus hung back like a shepherd. Breath in, step. The pipe rode loose against my palm the way a carpenter holds a hammer. I kept my eyes where they needed to be. Not on the map. On the world. Things lived here that did not know the touch of hate. They went about their business without shame or spectacle. Leaf tendrils trembled and retracted as I brushed past. A small animal with a mask like soot watched me as one would watch an alien head cocked, then blinked its yellow lids and sank into a green shadow. Flies with tails like little needles floated in columns over a patch of rot that smelled sweet. Far off something broke branches in a measured way, not alert, only walking with weight. I shifted downwind and let it have its path. The map shard had been torn from a larger body and kept no honest scale. A river mouth was a thumb-size smudge. A headland, a triangle of charcoal. I tried to make the world faded and the world refused. Fine. The world had been refusing me since the sky burned. Water made itself known the way a memory does. First as a thought in the back of your throat. The survivors of Chandurax know the tang of moisture well. Then a coolness where the air should have been warm and ashen dry. Then sound, this surprised me most of all, tucked low in the leaves. The sound of water on Chandurax was a slow dripping wasteful song. I found a runnel that had cut itself into a little ditch and walked beside it, the pack shoulder to shoulder with trunks furred in moss and the moss cool under the fingers. There were places where the water spread thin as silk over stone and looked like glass. I drank where it ran fast, my memory is my life as Jason told me it was the right thing to do. And the taste was clean and had no iron to it and no ash. I cupped it and let it spill through my fingers just to feel the weight of a thing so clean and natural. A lizard lay across a stone and pretended to be a stick. It was bad at pretending. Its throat pulsed with a blue coin of skin and the coin shivered at me as if my presence were a joke. Wind brought it my scent and its blue coin folded back into its chest and it crept with delicate feet into the leaf seam. A little script unrolled in my head and closed again. LV2, Creek Skink, neutral. EXP, trivial. It did not need to die and I had no call to make it. I moved on. In a tangle of roots a bird bobbed, brown as the dirt and wearing a tail like a reed bound with black thread. It paused, head down, and slid a worm from earth with a single smooth pull. The worm snapped once and gave up. The bird glanced at me as if I were late to a meal and looking to take the best piece. The script again, almost amused with itself, the way merchants hum when counting coin. LV3, Sedgetail, neutral. I did not pull the wheel fiddle from the pack. Even my hands knew better than to bring that black thing to the daylight without cause. I carried the skinner where I could feel its weight against my ribs and ignore the memories it bore. I ate what I knew. Things with eyes and a heartbeat and a ribs you can count. The jungle offered more abundance than I had ever seen and I did not trust it. Leaves everywhere and I did not take one into my mouth. Jason's memories bade fruit and I said no because my body had learned a hard book and it had no chapter for these trees. Toward dusk on the first day I set a snare for a long-eared thing that had left its prints as 2 commas in soft mud. It came as if scent, noise and the world around it would not have survived long on Chandurax. I took it clean and thanked it without speaking. The skinner did its old work and did not gloat. I scraped a little clearing as I had done in places where the ash lay the earth bare. I struck fire with the kit the chest had offered and the spark found the dry nest, the fire spreading quickly. Smoke licked the leaves and then the wind turned its head and carried it off. I cooked the meat slowly until the muscle could hold no parasite, something you learn to do when eating rats and crows. When I ate it the system the chorus had become, breathed in my ear reminding me of notifications awaiting my attention. EXP +14, solo, Treval, bonus, clean field dressing, +3 EXP. It was a strange mercy to eat because I wanted to and not because I had to shovel fuel into a furnace that would not keep itself. One animal's dying kept one boy's living going for a day and this was my math. Easy for once. No chain of mouths watching every bit to hoping to share a morsel far too small for even one. Night built itself in between the trees. Heat let go of the ground. Damp took its place, the wetness still strange on my cracked and dried skin. The cloak of crow leather was beginning to rot at the seams. The insects sang in invisible columns doubly attracted to me as I walked by. The stars came in pieces between roof leaves. The names came again tonight as they always came when night has me by the throat. The bone co always spilled out in times of stress, giving shape and voice to the old memories. I lay on my side with the pipe close and let them pass through me like a tide. The chorus kept its hand on my breath. While the dark fell, something odd occurred when fear of things in the dark looked for a way and it found the door barred. Fear immunity, keep active. I woke twice to the sound that was clearly a man stepping wrong. Both times it was only a fruit falling, and the sigh the leaves gave it on its way to the ground. The third time it was not. A shadow the size of a dog moved with decision behind the nearest trunk and then decided to be a bush. I slid the pipe to hand but did not wake the fire. "Whoever you are," I said in the dark, "you are closer to home than I am." It decided to be gone. By the second day I had learned to read the underbrush so that I wasn't tripping so often. The memories of the green days and playing in the wilds of Chandurax came flooding back, aiding my rate of adaptation. Jason had never liked going outdoors. Ant highways stitched the bases of trees, avoiding them was a gut reaction. It seemed some memories die hard. Where the ground wore a lace of pale fungus I stepped light and quick, it was squishy and odd. At noon I came to a place where the forest had decided the stream should be a braided thing. 3 tongues ran over red rock and met again in a blind pool as round as a globe and deep enough for a man to swim. I sat with my feet in the water and counted my breath and then stopped because for once there was no clock. A shadow moved under me and became 3 shadows, and then I understood them as fish. They were the color of bone except for their eyes, which were drops of ink. I made a spear and failed them twice and took one the third time and cleaned it with a knife and cooked it on a green stick and it tasted clean. The chorus made a note and I ignored it. I took to walking the stream bed where I could, the pack swayed shifting to new places on the shoulders. The jungle made war on everything in quieter ways than man do. Vines strangled trees and trees shattered rocks with patient rootwork and the rocks cut the water into threads. Mosquitoes hunted me and kept my hand ready. Where the stream bent I bent with it. Where it dropped I slid. The map shard rode the pocket of my collar, warm against bone. I did not need it to tell me the coast lay downhill. Before the third dusk I smelled no salt and knew I was wrong about distance. The sea was still far. The jungle continued on and on, scale as a lie map tells when you do not know the cartographer. I marked the lesson. On the morning of the third day I rose with the birds that scream at dawn. I walked in fog as soft as a dead man's breath. The stream grew louder and I grew quieter. The ground smelled of cold stone and mold. There was also the stink of some animal that had just passed. I did not know if the smell was warning me or welcoming me. I followed it. The chorus set a thin ring of a metronome. Halfway up a low ridge I saw the first of the beasts the system thought worth remarking on. It stood in the stream at a bend where the current made a cheek-like pool. It looked like a deer Jason remembered, except it wore plates along the spine like a roof and its eyes sat forward. It ate in the water with a patient rolling of the lips and lifted its head every 3 bites to look around. The script unfolded. LV6, Slateback Forager, cautious. It saw me and I saw it. There was a moment of tense predatory anticipation, then we agreed to live in the same world for another hour. I slid downstream with the water and left it enjoying a meal. A bird's nest big as a basin lay at eye height on a trunk starved of leaves by the vines that ate it. The nest had been woven by something that knew its art well. The eggs inside were not eggs so much as little sacks of light. Looking at them made the skin between my shoulders creep. I did not touch them. Whatever had made them clearly had more of a grasp of this jungle than I did. I knew I was not alone an hour later when the scent of something long forgotten stuck in the wind. Animal, not musk alone, rank and honest. I stopped at once and let the stream talk over the sound of my breathing. I don't think it found me through sight. I think we smelled each other. There is a moment when a living thing knows another is near before eyes and ears do their job. The boar came up out of the undergrowth as if the earth had decided to part like water. It was the size of a low table and longer and carried its head like an old bull experienced in protecting the herd. The back is smooth and gray with bristles the color of quenched steel. Ears sharp and pointed forward like hatchets. The eyes are small and set in a face cut to wedge itself into the world and make the world accept it. 2 tusks curved out from the mouth. Not long. Thick. The snout worked the air and wrote my name in the rich script that is sent. I took 2 steps to put my back to a trunk the thickness of 3 men. I set the pipe low butting against the tree. I breathed through the mouth as my breathing quickened. I reined it in. I did not need it to know I was afraid. LV12, Palmetto Raychog, lowland, dangerous. We looked at one another and the boar made its decision. The first rush came sudden but not so fast, a thing that size could not waste movement. It took 3 steps that pounded the ground into a drum and I moved on the 4th and let it carry itself past, the tusk sliding along the pipe with a sound that lifted every hair on my body. I put the butt into the meat above its shoulder and felt it as a dull blow in my arm. It did not squeal. It stopped, shocked by contact, and turned in a tight circle. Even with all my gains on Chandurax I was still on an even level with this beast. Steam puffed out its nostrils, quick and rapid. The hide crawled with little ripples of adrenaline. "Easy," I said as if it were a horse or pony. It backed up 2 paces and inhaled in 3 chuffs. The skin along its spine came up a fraction and light gathered in that seam, a red buried thing finding a way to the surface, and then the boar wore a mane. Flames stood up along its back and took the shape of a saw blade of red teeth licking toward the sky. Familiar heat slapped my face but with an unfamiliar humidity of steam that followed. The boar threw its head and steam knifed from the nose in 2 clear jets and the ground smoked where they struck a black stone. Warning, enrage. Effect, charge speed, hide hardening. "That's new," I said to nobody and braced. The charge this time ate the ground. It came off the bank with a tearing sound and the hooves struck and the beast folded in half to drive the head forward colored by its own fire. The afterwind turned in circles around the boar's ankles. I saw my only chance and I took it, pivoting to the colder side of the charge. The tusk hissed the pipe again and did not cut. I hammered down at the joint where neck becomes shoulder and the pipe rang and the boar staggered. The steam hit the tree behind me and the bark split and bled sap that stank of boiled sugar. That smell threw me back to my mother's kitchen on Chandurax. I slid down the bank to the stream. The boar did not like the water. The flame along its back spit and steamed when spray touched it. It stood on the bank, careful not to breach the water's surface. It had the high ground but its hesitation gave me an angle. I stepped in and let cold climb my shins. The boar brought its head up and rolled it and I saw the tusk turn like an oar and understood the threat it could hook a man's belly like a fisherman guts a fish. I kept the pipe low. It came from the same place it had just bluffed at. I gave it the same miss crouching deeper in the water waiting for my time. When the flank showed I put every mile of Chandurax into the swing, low to high, and the pipe met ribs and they buckled or bruised. It was hard to tell with the tough hide protecting the beast out. The sound went up the handle and drew a line through my jaw. The boar's steaming breath made a broken sound and the flame along its spine guttered and then clenched tight. It backed up the back and I followed it. We found ground. Its hooves slid and the others found purchase. It turned with the practiced speed of a predator. The steam this time came from my eyes. I turned my face but not fast enough. Pain lit the side of my head and I heard with the other ear only. I would have staggered from the pain but the boon stood. Fear/stagger immunity, active. The boar set itself for another rush and I did not wait. I went in and the sheer audacity of my wild retaliation surprised the old boar. I slipped to the left and drove the pipe end into the socket of the boar's eye. The boar screamed. The pipe sank an inch and hit something that did not like being struck and the boar's whole body shuddered in pain and rage. I wrenched, lost my grip on the pipe. The fire along the back lifted and went long and swept my forearm as I tried to find my weapon, skin crisped and screamed. The smell made my stomach remember home. I stepped off, let the pipe go with a wordless curse. I grabbed the skinner and went for the leg that drove the meat of the spoor forward. Rushing in the tendon behind the knee felt the blade fraying like a thick rope cut poorly and the leg folded. The boar turned itself with the other 3 limbs and came for me. It snapped. Its breath brought heat the environment could not account for. I put my back to a nearby tree and when it charged I jumped. Tusks pouring into the tree I landed, legs parted standing bare feet planted on the creature's tusks. I put the skinner into its skull but it wasn't enough so I put my heel into the crown of its head driving the butcher knife the way you put a wedge into a stubborn knot of wood and felt the old pop of skull come up my spine. The boar let its breath go. Jumping down I stood with my hands open and let the world bring itself back to a shape I could hold. The fire along the spine collapsed in on itself and little petals of red and went black, the bristles smoked. Steam vented once more from the nose, a sigh. The pipe hung from its skull at a bad angle and I pulled it free in the eye that had tried to keep it. I smiled and laughed even here the world wanted me dead. I put the pipe across my knees and saw the skin of my forearm cooked and the blisters rising and did not feel any of it. The boar had managed to overcome my fire resistance that was new. Palmetto Ragehog, LV12, slain. EXP plus 210, solo, plus bonus. I sank to one knee because it has been my habit to be grateful to each enemy combatant in the pits. The blood ran pink down the bank and into the stream and became nothing. The body shuddered once and a glow ran along the spine where the fire had stood. The bristles lifted in a tremor. The skin split cleanly down the seam of the back in a line from skull to tail as if cut by a surgeon's long mercy. Not blood. Not meat. Light. Amber poured out and draped itself over the hide and congealed in a shape the size of a fist. It hung there and hardened the way sugar does when it dries. Inside the amber a thing moved, a little dart of blue like the tip of a flame that refuses to die. Heat came off it in a clean way that made me think of bread ovens and not of war. The air around it moved as if choosing a place to be. Everything in me wanted to reach and take it. Everything in me that had learned not to trust wanted to step back and let it hang. The stream whispered nothing useful. The trees did not vote. Drop, Ember Monster Core, Medium. Jason's memories won over. All right, I said, and I reached. I cut it free with my knife and the core fell into my palm. Chapter 18. I left the stream bank without looking back. The boar hide sat right on the shoulders now that it had dried into itself. It carries the day's damp as a man carries a rock. When the rain came and when it darkened and shed the drops clean. When the wind moved under the leaves it gave off a warm reek of fat and smoke and the old animal that had worn it first. The jungle had no road in it, only tendencies. Depressions between root bowls that the water loved. A line of pale moss where a trickle eroded divots. Light arranged itself into long corridors when a stand of trees parted enough to allow it. I moved as a rumor between trunks. I put feet on leaf beds already pressed by other feet and let their permission carry me. When the stream laid itself thin across a shelf of stone I laid myself alongside it and drank face down and for once I did not count the gulps. When it plunged through a crack I threw the pack down and climbed after and felt the old thrill in the hands that were not mine but Jason's. When a column of leaf cutters went about the day's work with green flags raised, ants marching a seam into the world that even rain could not unwrite. I set a finger in their road to feel their will and the road parted without breaking and went around. They did not take the intrusion personally. LV1, Leaf Cutter Ant. A beetle as big as a knuckle hauled a pearl of sap held between forelegs as if carrying a precious gem. It paused when I paused and resumed when I did. I shifted to give it room. It was nice to respect the ways of life for once. LV1, Sap Bearer. A lizard with a spade head baked half in the sun and half in shade. Its chest pulsed slow and right. When my shadow crossed it the eyelids closed as if to blend in with the rock. I saw deer that were not deer. Long legs for stepping between roots, plates along the spine dull as old bronze to deny teeth their purchase. The air around them taut with anticipation as they scanned their horizons. A needle-tailed bird stitched the world as it flew, taking insects from the air with a sound you could call a click if you had to give it a word. It swung to a perch and measured me with its single eye. I lifted a palm and sat it down to show it there would be no exchange. It left me without a second thought. LV3, Needle-tail One-Eyed Swallow. When hunger came I set a loop of cord low under a log where little lives pass. A memory that rises unbidden from the depths of my first life. We had learned this before in something called Boy Scouts. A ground thing with stripes like bars gave itself into it without making a scene. The skinner did what it is made to do. I pulled the fat free with 2 fingers and fed it to the fire. The meat went to the tongue hot, charred and honest. I buried what I did not use in a place the next creature could find without digging very hard. I mistrusted leaves and fruits the way a man mistrusts a kind word from a complete stranger. Every green was a novel new experience. I cut, sniffed and touched, waited, pressed to lip, waited but did not eat. A river mouth and charcoal kept promising to be near and then did not appear and I stopped expecting it to. The sun climbed and fell then the next day at noon heat pinned noise under its thumb. The world breathed as if sleeping. The humidity so thick it condensed to jungle fog near the plant's leaves. The crow skin band at my wrist bled a little black into the water and then began to sag. It was now the last piece of crow skin I still had in the jungle claiming the other fragments with rot. I tightened it. Some weights you choose to carry because setting them down would be a different kind of wrong. Names came with the heat and I let them come because forcing them back is worse than hearing the dead. Duragan's voice came up from that good chest of his telling me to keep the furrow straight and the plow deep. Lyra watched without approving or accusing, simply acknowledging the loss. Casa lifted her chin one last time and said nothing and did not need to. The others Dr. Druvago, Malthus, the many, moves through me the way fine grit moves in wind, abrasion I deserve. The gutter pipe warmed at the crook of the arm. The metal did not find the names heavy. I leaned the weight on it when my legs shook and they steadied. The hours made a long rope and I walked it hand over hand. Rain came for 2 days without malice. It pelted the leaves, then pressed them flat, then lifted all the smells and sent them into the air around me. I thought of Chandurax then because I could not help it. Water there had been so extremely precious. Men there had learned to smell the poison mixed in that kills from rooms away. Here water was only water, doing its work with a simplicity that made me ashamed of what I had been forced to learn. After the rain the jungle put on its best, and not for me. Steam rose in veils and did not go far. A great torn leaf cupped a basin's worth of clean water and held it out, and I did not drink from it. I still had trouble trusting plants. Bromeliads held their little worlds full of wriggling lives, and I let them be. Orchids clung to bark with roots like old hands and gave the air a sour sweetness. A troop of tree things followed me for an hour at a height where I could not touch them if I wanted. Long arms, eyes too forward, a coarseness to the hair that said they knew about the cold even in a place that seemed to have forgotten about it. They threw nothing. They made sounds to one another as if discussing my qualifications for some job, like a mockery of tiny bureaucrats. In the last branch of the hour they left me for a fruiting tree far back in the green. LV4, Canopy Kin. Twice I came upon prints that did not belong to any animal I knew. Once, where mud holds its memory, there were pads as wide as two hands laid side by side, 4 to a foot, claws curved not for climbing but for holding a body still while teeth did work. The second time along a sandbar under a bend there were prints that walked in an alternating fan, each with a webbing between toes wide as belt leather. The chorus offered nothing I would not have guessed. I gave both places a wide berth. Night came honestly and I met it without hesitation. It seemed the greenery wasn't the only thing I mistrusted. The fire kit gave a spark and I nursed it to a quiet brightness. I set the cloak hair in and let the smoke take the worst of the insects. The black wheel fiddle sat in the dark with its crank turned away like a foreboding portent. I wound it once to hear if it still had breath, and the sound it gave reminded bones that they are a kind of flute when the right vibration is struck. Sleep, when it came, wore a plain face. The old dreams shouted like they always do when I could sleep deep enough for dreams. Drugo, Daravan, and the other children screaming in pain as the air itself stripped and melted their flesh. I let them. In the morning the fire had gone to a pleasant smoke, something that was unheard of on Chandurax. I soothed the soles with grease saved from kills before and wrapped the toes in leaves to buffer the ground and walked until walking turned the head quiet again. Days and I saw a shape through the understory that made me step off the path the water had suggested and breathe through my teeth to keep the sound low. A cat built out of shade stood in a pool of sunlight like a void, warming itself endlessly, consuming the rays. The backline and spine rolled with cords I understood from my own shoulders, a grizzled veteran's strength. Its head turned and the eye cut through brush in a way that made me freeze as if I had been caught. I had seen death at the hands of crueler things. I watched until its tail rode a lazy ass of disinterest. I did not move a muscle. It picked its way onto a log and left its pads where any animal could read them and was gone. LV17, Shade Lion. I took the hint and paid the cat beast with distance. Insects stitch the days together. Their stings and bites an ever-present reality of the thick vegetation and humidity. There were others too, bees that wore skirts of pollen so heavy they had trouble staying aloft in the slightest breeze. Flies made like black carpets as they sought to feed on my untanned boar hide. A wasp that knew its business so completely it made fear wasteful, long body like a skewer, wings talking at a speed hissed instead of hummed. The thing dive-bombed me. I gave it the width of a few men's strides. The wasp returned the favor by not following the assault. The map shard softened at the creases and took my sweat, and still I kept it. I made camps unworthy of the name. A lean-to of a broadleaf set against a buttress root. A bed of fern fronds crossed until they argued themselves into something like a mattress. Fire set small and penned with 3 stones. I watched the sky through cracks in the cover and saw more stars than a man who has lived indoors and grew up under burning skies would believe are left in the world. On a day when the air tasted faintly of rain but a storm would not break. I crossed a gorge where water braided itself into 3 pale threads. A tree laid itself down over the narrowest point who knows how many years before and had grown new roots into the far wall. Using the pipe on that living rail and balanced, I did not look down. The earth bellied under the foot inside and worms wrote their slow cursive up through the leaf meal. Fungi shouldered out of dead wood in shelves thick as a rich man's bread. The scent had layers to it, sweet as bruised fruit, sharp as iron filings, an animal stink that did not belong to anything with a face. I walked the margins and trusted the roots that stood like buttresses on old cathedrals. To step off into that soft country would be to invite disease. Near dusk the underbrush hushed so suddenly it sounded like a word. The body with its old instruction raised the neck hair before the mind accepted the lesson. I crouched without arguing and let the pipe hang in a way that could become any of a dozen tools in a blink. No wind. No birds. Only the small tick underscoring a beetle's slow sermon. I eased back heel by heel until the hush lifted like a conductor resuming the show. There was enough time for grief and I took it on the march. The counts of the dead got said under the breath the way farmers counted ducks. I spoke the names. No one answered. The world did not write itself smaller to make room for them, they were long gone. I thought about the razor doors sealed on Dragon with his chain wrapped on both hands and the prayer cut to the root in his teeth and the way he smiled when he lied to me one last time. I thought about Van Brandt and how a body can hold on long enough to turn a key in a machine that does not want it turned. I thought about Casa laughing in the face of Crowman who wanted nothing more than to break open her bones and feast on the marrow. The jungle carried those stones without buckling. The days added to one another until you could not tell where one stopped. My skin remembered softness without feeling weak. My feet learned the geography of their own flesh again. The pipe found its place in the hand amongst new healthy calluses. The monster core thrummed in my bag with latent energy. When I passed a place where a willow-like tree had sent down 100 ropes and turned the air under it into something akin to a room, I halted for the first time, considering standing in one place for the first time since I was 7 years old. I set the pack down and slept an hour with my cheek on my arm and awoke sweating and panting with the taste of earth in the mouth and the sound of water running. I put the band scrap of crow leather back on the wrist and picked up the pipe and went to see it. The stream thickened into a runnel that could wash a man away only if he obligingly lay down for it. It bent north and west under a tangle of fallen trees and came into a clearing with ferns high as a boy. I went through them feeling their frond tips tap the legs like blind fingers and came out into a place the sun had been invited into. I stood in it long enough to remember how to enjoy the sun. I have to admit I was lost. Not the kind of lost that makes you spin in place and shout at trees. A wider loss. The sense that the world I stood in had no corners I could name, no edges or people. Days learned each other. The first mornings I had woken with that old iron in the chest, the rack smell of the wheel room still in my throat, hands ready to catch the attack that never came. By the second week the iron had thinned. A different weight came in. Not kinder. But it carried a routine. I rose with the birds there, like a long-lost memory of a lullaby. I walked until the day's heat settled in. Then I sat in the shade on a root that had grown into a bench long before anyone came to sit on it. I chewed charred, dried and preserved meat. Here I tended to my feet. The feet mattered. Chandurax had kept every piece of me in a state of rot or desiccation and called it life. Here the water kissed instead of gnawed, and the skin remembered it had a job. The splits at the heels closed, nails stopped tearing. The cloak I made from the boar hide kept the wet off on the days when the sky tore open. It kept the bugs off better than anything else I had tried, but only because it was a better target. Every time I pulled it close the smell rose, earth and a little of that sweet scorch the boar had carried in its mane when it burned, yet it was slowly being followed by the scent of decay. The crow leather smock that had once been an armor against a sky, a trophy torn off men worse than beasts, turned useless and then wrong, was only the band on my wrist now. In the humidity it soured. The seams let go. I rinsed it, oiled it, tried again. It still wore the old pit on it like a voice, and I found I could not bear to see our accomplishments rot. I folded it and left it under a hump of roots. I did not mark the tree. I did not look back. It felt like a sin and a cure in the same dose. Hair came back. On the jaw first as a ragged hedge, then on the chest in a scatter of black that did not belong to the boy who had gone down the first time. The sun put a brown on me that no lamp had ever managed, deeper than any Chandurax day would allow even if the burn had been held back. Scabs turned from red to gray to smooth. Scars turned from rope to quiet lines. I found new ones from the jungle, thin white tickets from thorn, beans of raised flesh from stings. The chorus fell quiet most days. It had work to do with the network and did it without making ceremony of it. When it spoke, it was with the same clipped tone it had learned when the node stitched us into its economy. Local curfew, dusk, governorial, level opportunities, pending orientation. I kept the level prompt at the edge of my sight and did not touch it. On Chandurax every time an opportunity had promised me power the bill had come due in blood. The network here had paid me in boxes that grew out of the earth and a vial that asked me what kind of man I meant to be for 10 minutes at a time. It could wait for its answer on my bones. I would spend what life I had been given when I needed it and not before. Hunting changed. Alone changes the math. A whole caravan can strip a place, eat the meat and the marrow and burn the crow bones. Once man learns to look at a fat rodent and see 3 days and not an hour, such abundance the jungle has to offer confounds the mind. I snared when I needed and never came up short. The system did not care that I fed or that I slept or that I did not take every life it offered. It had its own ledger. River lizard, level 3, foraged, blue cap, SAFE, hydration plus 5%. Hunted, tree hare, level 2, plus experience, minor. I learned the daily route of certain lives. A line of ants used a fallen log as a highway every noon, and if I sat with my back to that log they climbed my heel and ignored me like a stone. A pair of long-armed monkeys held a council in the canopy of a tree I came to often because the shade offer was too enticing. They threw unripe fruit when I came the first 3 times and then they stopped and only watched as if they had decided I would leave them be. A cat that had the color of old bronze and a face stitched with white marks crossed the trail one morning and did not look at me at all. I froze and I only breathed when it was gone. I showed myself when I must. Twice to move a pig thing off a path that would have preferred me cornered. Once to make a vulture let go of a horned hare I had hit with the pipe and then lost to brush. That one took a swing of the pipe and a sprint and ended with me laughing on my back, the hare in my fist, the vulture stalking in a circle with the same disgust a shareholder once gave me when I bled him out across the floor. Laughter felt wrong in the mouth and I did not try to explain that to the jungle. At night I made small fires. The note had warned of curfew and I obeyed but not from fear of any governor. Predators in the dark moved with a neatness I could respect. I banked the coals and let the smoke tell the bugs to go somewhere else. I slept on a bed of woven vines under the cloak and rolled every hour like a man learning to sleep without the scream from the next pen to pull him back up. They had yet to stop screaming. The Boneko kept its small habits. Names come to you when you lie flat and the blood lowers its voice. Duragan walked the path at the edge of sleep, head down, hands out as if finding a gate. Lyra stood with her pan and every time I saw her she was not swinging it but washing it, the same circling motion, the shine never coming. Venbrandt did not come. I did not ask why. Rain came and kept coming. The world filled. Streams fattened and thinned in a single day. The mud took to my feet like magnets. The pipe I bound across my back with a strip of the pack when I needed both hands. It hummed when the air swept through it, as if the latent thing in it stirred at the pressure. I never woke up not wanting it in reach. 3 weeks or something near that and still no coast. The shard's usefulness was completely lost unto me and I considered losing it more than once. 3 weeks or something near that and still no coast. I followed the water. The rule had held long enough to get me out of trouble but now in a stretch of reed where the ground looked whole, then one misstep. I went into muck to the waist and came out the color of a new man. I found a bank high enough that it allowed me to crawl out. And I stood there until my breath evened. The animals of this place wore numbers the way men in the hive wore pins and collars. I could smell the levels on some of them when they passed. The boar I had killed had been a 12 by the system's count, I had been 12 too but with a stronger will. And the fight had written its ledger accordingly. Since then I had let higher numbers be and taken what would not press me into the ground. Stealth did the work that a pipe would have in the pit. By the 4th week the skin of my shoulders turned the hard brown of men who work out under a sky. Hair grew where hair had not. I looked down at my legs and saw a stranger's shins with the same scars, a stranger's calves with the same knots of muscle. The face I learned only by touching it, a new lay of beard, a mouth that did not twitch toward a smile or a snarl unless asked. I had become accustomed. That was the worst knowledge. It means you have decided you will be alive the next day. On Chandurax that decision killed people. Here it did not, and I kept waiting for the penalty that did not come. It felt like a betrayal to every stone on the Ashen Path. The day I realized that and set it in the chest where the words go to be weighed, the jungle gave me a sign to look at something besides myself. I sat under a tree that hung its roots like a harp and chewing a strip of meat I had blackened on a coal until the fat ran out of it and caught on the tongue like oil. The light had gone the color of fire. The breeze shifted. It brought me smoke but not the wrong kind. Camp smoke has a clean order to it when the men making it mean to sleep and not to slash and burn. It goes up in a neat column until the leaves take it and pull it apart. Jungle fire crawls and claws and tells the nose the old story of meat running for its life. This was clearly the former. I set the meat down on my knee. No prints here in the last day, rain had licked the ground clean. No cut cane in this area that I had seen. I stood and moved uphill on the ridge to keep the silhouette low. The pipe lay against the spine of my body and did not complain. At the crest I went to ground and pulled myself forward with elbows. The earth there was dry and scattered with leaf that had died before the rain. My fingers sank with a patient sigh. The cloak scuffed once. I eased my head up against the root of a tree and let one eye see. The first sign was rope. Not vine. Rope laid in a loop from one sapling to another. The second sign was a low frame built from 3 green poles and one old, the old one blackened along its length, someone's cook stand. The third sign was awful buried badly, shallow enough that you could still smell the gut when the wind paid attention. Men had eaten here and moved on or were prowling the area and meant to come back after dark. I held my breath and listened for anything, a spoon against a tin. A foot striking a stone ache off 2 ridges over when a man who smokes clears his throat. But no noises came. I did not move. The breath can be a flag. Flags get shot. I watched until my eyes stung, closed them to pump tears, and opened again. Something moved in the far brush at knee height, quick and straight, and I read it for a lizard until it made a decision and rose a little to clear a route I wasn't sure. I waited and waited. Down in the brush south of the rope, a figure took shape against the last of the light. Not all of it. The shoulder and the head and the moving hand putting a pot down easy. Then another shape behind it, taller, a man by the set of the neck, straight even when he leaned. I put my cheek to the dirt and felt the hummed pulse that runs in the ground right before the light fell, and everything that lived underground was waking up. I counted names to keep the hands steady. Dragon. Lyra. Casa. Venbranth. The wheel room, the pit, the spiral, the locked door. The glass moth stitched under the earth. The eye and the line. The way the adjudicator's eyes had not moved when the ramp rose. I let them sit in me without asking for anything. I asked the new world for one thing only. Let me see first. I breathed once through the nose and made that breath so soft the leaf under the lip did not move. The man turned his head. He said something I could not hear. I slid the pipe out from under the cloak and felt the skin of my palms find the places the pipe had worn in my hand. The thought came then that had not come in weeks. I am not alone. The sky went from iron to blue to the first black. The camp breathed to life. I did not move.